Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, Minister and Secretary. My questions relate to Tibet and also modern slavery and Magnitsky. So I can never pronounce it, but it's an interesting combination, but it will become clear, hopefully.
Fire away, Senator.
Thank you very much. And so my first question is in relation to a UN Special Rapporteur's report on forced labour. I think that was released in December last year. And it very clearly showed that, or found, that particularly in agriculture and manufacturing, it is not just Uyghurs who are now in enforced labour slavery, but also Tibetans. So one is the Australian government aware of this, and upon resumption of trade talks with China, is this something that you intend to move, to discuss, to ensure that our supply chains from China are slavery-free? It's something we've discussed before, but if we're just getting some initial advice on your level of knowledge of that report.
Senator Ellie Lawson, Acting Deputy Secretary Geostrategic Group. We are, of course, aware of that report, deeply aware of the concerns around forced labour and have made representations about that on numerous occasions. The specific concerns around forced labour on Tibet we're not so aware of, so we'll be pleased to hear any information that you have about that. That
would be great. So it's the most recent forced labour report by the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of slavery. Good to see you, Ms Manton, who might be able to shed more light. But it's actually pages 7 and 8 talk about forced labour, not just amongst the Uyghur, Kazakh, but also there's increasing evidence now of widespread similar slavery in those sectors from forced labour sourced from Tibet. So,
thank you, Senator. And I would also reference that we have broadly the human rights situation in Tibet is something that we have raised on a number of occasions with the Chinese government as well. So we do continue to raise those broad concerns.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question then segues into rare earths, and it is widely known that at various stages of the extraction through to the production of batteries and other minerals, and I know the Minister is very aware of this, that slavery occurs not only in source countries for extraction, but again, increasing evidence that the manufacture of a lot of modern goods that rely on these batteries, etc., is subject to forced labour of various ethnic minorities in China. Now, we have been looking at, I know, and in another committee starting to have a look at what we can do to highlight this to companies, possibly through the modern slavery legislation and reporting. But it has been raised with me that there's a specific issue now in Tibet in this area in relation to lithium mining. So the information that I've been given is that obviously lithium is being mined in Tibet, and despite protests from Tibetans about the removal of Tibetans from their ancestral homelands, it is being done in a way that is causing illness and also widespread environmental destruction in Tibet, and that there may also be modern slavery or slavery involved in that by forced labour. So it's not only is the lithium mined in Tibet, but as we all know, Australian mined lithium is sent to China for processing, again down the supply chain, quite likely forced labour. So that I'm happy to leave on notice because unless someone's got something on that in particular.
I wonder if I could just
please,
say
Minister.
Something here, because prior to the election, this was something that I engaged with Walk Free and other advocates about, and it was pretty clear to me, even though obviously it wasn't technically in the domestic legislation is in the Attorney General's portfolio, that this issue kept being raised, sometimes in respect to certain areas, in respect of certain areas of the word, but more generally. So you may or may not have clocked, Senator, that we did go to the election with a commitment in relation to strengthening the Modern Slavery Act, because it is a way of ensuring businesses and consumers can be required to and can gain greater sort of visibility of this as a disincentive. I'd also note that Ms Lucienne Manton, who's sitting next to me, who is the person with the longest ambassadorial title in the portfolio, but it includes modern slavery, people smuggling, trafficking, and people trafficking and modern slavery. Did I get that right?
To counter that, yes.
Yes, counter that. I meant obviously countering that, not for it.
Yes. Anti.
Yes, and her team put together the Bali process, and which included a discussion in the morning with the Business Forum on modern slavery, and it might be useful for her to report on that.
Thank you. Manton.
Thank you very much. Lucienne Manton, Ambassador to Counter Modern Slavery, People Smuggling and Human Trafficking. It's taking me a while to get that rolling off the tongue, but really important because it does highlight a strong commitment that Australia has to countering modern slavery, both at home and abroad. And as the Minister said, on the 10th of February, we hosted, or the Minister hosted in Adelaide, the 8th Bali Process Ministerial Conference and the 3rd Bali Process Government and Business Forum. Critically, this is a really unique forum that brings government representatives from around our region together with business representatives from around our region to talk about how we can work together on exactly these issues. So that's forced labour and other forms of modern slavery and human trafficking. And critically, the Bali Process Government and Business Forum committed to going further in terms of the work that it is going to do with government in addressing these issues, to acknowledge the problem, to act to address it, and to advance the issues.
Thank you, and that's very, very good to hear. And again, as a member of another committee, we're waiting for just by way of background, waiting for the review of the Modern Slavery Act, and then quite possibly we'll initiate a parliamentary inquiry in where to next from a parliamentary perspective, and not just on the Act as it currently is.
And this is not intended as a partisan point. In government, amendments that were moved in the Senate that went to strengthen the Act were not supported by the then government. So the more bipartisanship on this that can be generated, I think, would be a good
Senator
thing.
Wong, I was the minister at the time taking the Act through, and
yes. I'm not having. I just
no, I know, and
it would be good if we could come to through the committee process a position across the Parliament on this, because I think nobody wants to. I think the way I put it when we were asked questions by the media, I said, no one wants to profit from forced labour, and no one wants to contribute to people profiting from forced labour.
Look, Senator Wong, I totally agree, and certainly on my side of politics, we might not refer to human rights as much as we do individual freedoms, but we're all talking about the same thing and the same outcome for individuals. So we are looking to do that, and I'm confident it will be actually multi-partisan.
That'd be good.
And particularly in relation to questions I've asked previously in this, and also in the mining estimates, or to mining officials, is how do we raise the issue of dirty supply chains where there is slavery, and put a value on it for our own producers. And by doing that, by raising the human rights abuses elsewhere. So anyway, thank you very much for that. Now, I just wanted to raise another issue as well, if I could, in relation to the Chinese government's report. 1 minute, this is the last one.
Perfect, all right.
Actually, I lied, there's two quick ones, but I can get them on notice. So the first one is that the UN's now reported on the removal of nearly 1 million Tibetan children, forcibly removed into boarding houses, into congregate care, where I think the most kind way of putting it is complete re-education and cutting them off from their family ties and traditions. Others might more uncharitably call it ethnic cleansing. So I'm just wondering if you could perhaps take on notice what you know about this already, and what more we can do, because not just in a human rights violation. I mean, the Americans have just called out the Russians for the removal of 6,000 Ukrainian children, but that's it's a war crime. But this, I think, is clearly against the Protocol on the Rights of the Child as well. Ms Lawson.
Senator, I can say that we are aware of the report by the UN experts from November and again in February regarding the separation of children from their families in large-scale boarding houses. They are deeply disturbing. We do take them seriously. We have raised our concerns about human rights in Tibet many times, as I say, most recently on the 9th of February this year, the Foreign Minister raised concerns with Foreign Minister Wang Yi about Tibet as well. And we were one of 47 countries to join a statement on human rights in China at the UN Human Rights Council, which also included a reference to Tibet, so broad concerns about Tibet having reference, and we take the specific circumstance you mentioned very seriously.
That's great. So will you use the, I think it's the 52nd Human Rights Committee meeting to raise this particular issue? I haven't got the date here when it is, but the 52nd session of the UNHCR.
Senator, we don't have specifics on what to raise at this time.
So if you could perhaps take on the notice what you're going to do. And then, Chair, with an indulgence, can I just put one question on notice?
Sorry, I just would say, though, I think
Thanks.
under both parties of government, Australia has been consistent in the UN context on this issue.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I haven't actually sort of been this view, so it'd be good to put it on the record. And the other one is in relation to the third issue, Magnitsky sanctions. My understanding is that the US in December have issued that sanction, I still can't pronounce it, on 2 Chinese officials, specifically for human rights abuses in Tibet. And I can provide more, but you should have information on that. And is the Australian government looking to do something similar now?
Thank you very much, Senator Reynolds. On that note, we'll now suspend for afternoon
On notice, thank you, Minister.
tea, and